Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to again apologize. This was recorded the day after the Fisticuffs episode, so Nick is still not here. He is off qualifying with his weapons for the Border Patrol, and nobody who's anybody turns down free ammo. So I did not rate today, apparently. I'm sure he would have come if he'd known it was you, Dan. But he wanted to go shoot things for free. So
there's no guarantee.
All right. So the next part of the introduction is we let Mr. Dan Jolley introduce himself to our listeners and viewers at home.
Hi, guys. I'm Dan Jolley. I'm basically a professional nerd, I guess. I mean, I'm a writer. I've been writing since I was 19, and that's many, many moons ago. That's back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. And started out writing comic books and got from there into media tie-in novels, from there into original novels, children's books, got into video games back around 2007. Have done a little tiny bit of screenwriting. I'm kind of all over the place. I always tell people, as long as I'm writing, I'm happy. So I'm not real picky about the medium that I'm writing in. But almost all the stuff that I've done has been sci-fi and fantasy. So I think I have the bona fides to make it here.
Please tell me you put professional nerd on your business card.
Well, I will now.
That is just too cool to pass up. Like, I'm even asking that to hashtags now. Professional nerds. Do you introduce yourself like that normally?
It varies. I write so that I don't have to talk to people.
Totally get that.
You never know what you're going to get. Sometimes I'm like real outgoing. I've gone to parties and walked in and been like, hey, look at all these people I don't know. And I've gone and introduced myself. And then other times you can't get me to go to a party.
You'll appreciate this then. That my son for the last Father's Day got me a t-shirt that said, I used to be a people person and then people ruined it. I'm like, this kid gets me.
Yeah, relatable.
I figured you would like that. All right. So the next part of the introduction, dear listeners, how we first found them. And he actually reached out to us. So a stork delivered him to the podcast, but we won't tell where the stork came from because that's kind of top secret. But now that he is here, he does have to answer a religion question. So Dan, are you ready for this?
Sure.
All right. Star Wars, Star or Firefly?
So I was raised in a dual religion household. I was I was very much Star Wars and Star Trek, and until the fourth movie came out, I would have said Star Wars all the way. And then it became clear that the universe that I had built up in my mind surrounding the three movies that existed when I was a kid was better than what they actually decided to put out there. So now I will say Star Trek. I have cast my lot into the Star Trek game.
I will say that if you're experiencing Star Wars through the movies, you're missing out. Some of what they call expanded lore or expanded legend now, the old books that they got rid of when Disney bought it, some of those are phenomenal works of literature. And now that they're not canon, I really do hope those authors pull it back, scratch the serial numbers off, and republish, because some of those storylines were phenomenal, especially like the X-Wing and the Rogue Squadron, the Commandos books that Karen Travis put out, like some amazing mill sci-fi writing.
And I've actually written, very small contributions, but I've actually written in both the Star Wars and the Star Trek canon.
Nice. So still talking sci-fi before we move on to the fantasy religion question. If you could write in any IP, obviously you've written in a lot of them, and so I really do suggest to your listener, and I don't always say this, but go check his website out. The covers are amazing, and he's kind of been all over the place with his creativity, so he's gotten to play in a lot of playgrounds, and I'm kind of jealous. But what was your favorite one to write in, and then of the ones that you like that you haven't written in, which one would you stop everything to write for?
Now, are we still on Star Wars and Star Trek, or is this
No, just sci-fi in general. So if you could stop for any one sci-fi project, you'd stop everything to write for them. So for me, it would be like Stargate or Fallout. If they asked me to write for them, everything else is going on the back burner. I'm writing. I love those two universes.
Well, I'll tell you the one that I had the best time working for, and that was because the licensor was the best to work for there, and that was Voltron.
Really?
Yeah, I did a revival of the property for Devil's Due Publications back in 2002, 2004, somewhere back in there. And World Events is the license holder. And they are a dream, or at least they were 20 years ago. Every concept that I came up with, they were like, yes, that's fantastic, do that. They let me mess around with the universe a little bit. You know, I wanted to keep it really, keep the spirit alive, do it justice, but the stuff that I thought needed to be massaged, they were cool with everything I wanted to do. I think the only change they ever requested is one of the promo material pieces. They were like, can the characters be smiling? That was it, you know. So that was just the best experience, getting to work on something that I really loved as a kid, and just getting the stamp of approval from the people that own it. But you know, there are other kinds of relationships with licensors. I did some comic work for World of Warcraft, and I'm not saying that Blizzard was bad to work for. It's just that they're very exacting. You know, the property was their big cash cow at the time, and they were very careful stewards of the property.
Well, given what happens when you're not, I can't really blame them. So one of the problems with Star Wars, for instance, is George Lucas never met an idea he didn't like and didn't say yes to. And so when you've got location A and location B are canonically 12 days apart, and you have, because everybody that wrote Star Wars wanted Luke, Leia, Han, you know, they wanted the main characters. And when you have them at location A on day one and location B on day two, there's no way they could get between the two. So you've already added conflicting canon. And so because he said yes to everything, that's one of the reasons Disney couldn't keep it all. They would have had to piecemeal it and then potentially re-edit some of it to make the canon match up. Would have been easy to do. Time-consuming, sure, but you would end up with a crap ton of re-releases. But because of that, I respect it when they guard their IP for canonical consistency. But the one I've heard that's the worst to work for is the Warhammer 40K. Because their fans are so exact, like there's no wiggle room at all. Like, no, that was 3 seconds off on what the max speed was. You got it wrong. There's gun people, and then there's Warhammer 40K people, if you know what I mean.
Oddly enough, and I'm not going to name anybody specific here or any properties, but it's not an uncommon thing when you're writing licensed property novels, not comic books or video game tie-in or whatever, but actual novels. It's not that uncommon for the licensed property editor not to know the canon all that well, or not to care. Like there was a guy that I worked with was doing novels tied into a very popular TV franchise, and he came up with an idea that was set between two specific episodes, starring one specific character who between that episode and the next was traveling from one place to the next. And he was like, here's a story that takes place with this character from this time of day to this time of day on this between the events of these two episodes. And the licensed property editor said, oh, no, that character got there immediately.
That's not how travel works, generally speaking.
And he was like, well, they mention it. They mention it in the second episode, like it took this long to get to. And the editor said, nope, it didn't happen that way. And, you know, the editor is most of the time like the firewall. You know, they're the one who hires you. They're the one who makes sure that you get paid. And if they're the one that says, I mean, they are the one that says yes or no. They may be just the first in a line of people who say yes or no, but they're the first one. And so, you know, if they say no, then, well, he had to scrap that idea and come up with something else.
I've written for other people's universes. Nothing as iconic as like the franchises of our childhood, like Voltron or Star Wars or Star Trek. But one of the things you learn is the books that are the best, that are, when you write in other people, when someone's written in another universe that isn't their own, are ones where the author or the creative is also a fan. Because if you don't know the property, and that's part of what got some of the new releases for Star Wars, everyone blamed it on the political angle. No, it's just they weren't fans. They wanted to write their own thing and slap Star Wars on it so they could get the cash cow. But they just weren't fans of the franchise. And that much was clear when you listen to them talk. I like everything, but I want to change it all. I'm like, well, then you're not a fan and you didn't like everything.
Well, I can clear up one thing. George Lucas did occasionally say no. I know, because he said no to me.
Well, that's kind of cool. At least that he said no to something. Not that you had to deal with the no, but generally speaking.
The one Star Wars thing I ever did, it was a little like 8 or 10 page story, a comic book story, when Dark Horse Comics had the Star Wars license.
Okay.
And it was in an anthology. Dark Horse Presents, or was it Star Wars Tales? Star Wars Tales number 2. I don't remember exactly. It was a long time ago. But you had to get on the approved Lucasfilm writers list. And this is I'll try to make this brief. The editor said, "Okay, we got to submit your name, and you got to get you on this list before you can do anything." So they submitted my name, came back approved, and the editor said, "Wow, Mike Richardson, the head of Dark Horse, must really like you," because he had pull with Lucasfilm. So I did the story. It came out. It was fine. It didn't make any huge ripples, but it was good. And so then they said, okay, now we're going to do a maxi series about the Jedi Council. So pick a Jedi from the Jedi Council and come up with a story, and it's going to be a solo starring thing. So I picked one, and I came up with a story, and it was submitted. We waited months, literally months. And then I got a call. Lucasfilm came back and flatly rejected all 12 proposals from all 12 writers who had submitted. And the note that they gave was, your people don't get it.
Okay.
Make of that what you will.
Given what we've seen come out from them, I don't think they get it either, apparently.
And that was back when Lucas was still in charge,
Yeah.
But then fast forward to, I don't know how many years, 12 years later, and I'm at Dragon Con in the VIP lounge, and there's Mike Richardson. First time I have ever met the man in person. First time I've ever spoken to him. And I wanted to say, thank you for getting me on the Star Wars approved writers list, even though I only got to do the one story. So I walk up and stick my hand out, tell him who I am, and he shakes my hand, says, "Hey, great to meet you." And before I can say anything, he goes, "Somebody at Lucasfilm must have really liked you, because I had no idea how you got on that approved writers list."
Somebody slipped your name in between the pages, and it just got signed on accident. I don't know.
I think I might have had that one story published as a clerical error.
Okay. All right. So we'll move on to the fantasy side of the house, because we are polytheistic here at the Blades podcast. So, Game of Thrones, The Wheel of Time, or Chronicles of Narnia?
Well, you would think that there might be a clue, a hint here. Can you see that because of the glare? That's a Game of Thrones.
Oh, Game of Thrones. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I read the first part of the first book of Game of Thrones, and for whatever reason, it didn't grab me. I did start watching the TV series, and I was really invested in that up until they ran out of books. And I imagine that's a really, really common story. So, I liked most of the TV series. Can't say anything about the books. So for the purposes of this, I'm going to have to say Chronicles of Narnia. I understand that there are various quibbles that people have with it, but that was one of the formative series of my childhood. The Voyage of the Dawn Treader was phenomenally influential on me as a kid, as a writer. So yeah, Mr. Lewis has me for this.
Okay. Yes, there's room for nostalgia. Nostalgia sells too if you do it right. So I will say the doomed final seasons of Game of Thrones did give us some hilarious bloopers. And I've seen like when people write reviews, oh, this was clearly not edited because I found one comma out of place. And I happen to know the author in that particular book, and I'm like, no, it got edited 7 times, bro. Like sometimes they just stuff happens, right? And you kind of got to respect the comma that just doesn't disappear after 7.
You can't squash every bug,
right? But so when I saw that, I realized how funny reviewers are. But the one that I really liked, though, about the Game of Thrones, the last season, there were the 2 bloopers that made it through the editing passes where they had like one was a Starbucks coffee cup on the scene that was visible, and the other was like a plastic water bottle. So the movie franchise for HBO basically made Starbucks canonical in Westeros.
Didn't realize it had that big a reach.
Right, me either.
All the way to Westeros, yeah.
I always knew they were evil, the evil coffee empire. But yeah, I saw those, and like I know other people got really upset about it, like the lack of immersion. And I know they could probably edit that out, when they release the box sets or whatever. But I thought it was hilarious. I watched those scenes. I haven't seen most of the episodes, but I watched the scenes with those when I heard about them, just because I thought it was awesome. So that does it for me. I like those. Normally, though, Martin isn't normally for me. He's a little too grimdark for me. I prefer more hopeful stories. I don't mind a dark setting as long as there's hope at the end of it. But darkness for darkness sake, I mean, reality sucks enough. I don't need help.
That's actually how I wound up writing these 3 fantasy books. That is the premise of this podcast.
Oh well, then we'll revisit
this
that
particular podcast.
We'll revisit that in just a second. So, all right. The other one that we used to add for the sci-fi or for the fantasy side of the house was Lord of the Rings. But how do you compete with that? Everyone always said that, so we had to take it off the list.
Well, that's kind of like when Alan Moore was regularly writing comic books, and every single year he was on the list of people nominated for the Eisner Award for Best Writer, and every single year he won.
That was like David Weber at DragonCon for Mill Sci-Fi every year too, when that used to be a category. Sometimes it happens. Okay, so one of the crying shames of adulthood is we stop asking each other the important questions. So thanks to one of our sponsors, we are bringing this back. But what is your favorite dinosaur?
Oh man, I have always loved the Triceratops.
That is a cool one. I know everyone goes T-Rex for default because it's the one everyone knows, but the Triceratops is it for me.
Well, it just it's like a tank. It's like an ambulatory tank with spears. So I just always thought that they looked the coolest. I usually saw illustrations in kids' books about dinosaurs of a T-Rex and a Triceratops fighting. And I've always gravitated to the unusual, the outsider, the underdog, the unconventional. And so like everybody roots for T-Rex, so that makes it less appealing.
Yeah, and I don't know. I like that, and I will watch my language, dear listener. We were working on that here at the Fort Handley. But one of the things I like about the Triceratops is it's capable of defending itself, but it's the true F around and find out, because it's chill until it's not, and you mess with it, and then it's like, all right, buddy, it's on. I kind of dig that personality trope, so to see that in dinosaur form was just too cool.
Yeah, and like people are like, well, it's a herbivore. Well, yeah, so are hippopotamuses.
Right. And then of course, the other part of that is if you're of the right age, anything that was in the land before time.
Oh, right.
The dinosaurs, because, we kind of had that special bonding with them.
Well, I'll do you one better. because I think from what it sounds like, I might be a little older than you are. Land of the Lost.
I've seen that and the reboots. Loved it. But you're right. Land of the Lost came out. I watched it in syndicated reruns.
Yeah, I was a small child back in the 70s.
I was not around in the 70s. I don't think I was a twinkle in my daddy's eye yet. But I'll have you know, my son assures me that I am, in fact, ancient. At one point in time, he did ask if I fought the dinosaurs in the war. I'm like, Jiminy Crickets, kid, no dessert for you. All right. Because we are no longer knuckle-dragging troglodytes, we are civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Coffee or tea, and how do you take it?
Coffee. I used to take it no cream, lots of sugar, but I switched things up, and now it's coffee with coconut milk if I can get it.
Why specifically coconut milk? Is it just because dairy, or is this coconut flavor better than like almond or soy or any of the other substitutes?
Well, this is another great thing about getting old. Now I have to be more conscious of my blood pressure and things that affect my blood pressure. And so coconut milk is, if you're going to put creamer in coffee, that's one of the better options that you have.
Interesting.
Nothing real exciting there.
I've heard people say heavy cream is really good because you don't need as much of it. A little bit goes a long way with that. I haven't tried that one yet either. Normally, it's just I use the was it Coffee Mate French vanilla because that's my favorite flavor ever. And I'm basic. I get the same thing every time, and I like it that way.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way you take coffee.
But I've been trying to force myself to like it, or at least tolerate it black when I need the caffeine, but I can't have the calories. Because when I started actually tracking calories, I looked at it and I'm like, holy crap, I've been drinking a Big Mac. Time to look at, no wonder I got fat. So I had to go through and look at ways to cut calories. And I used to add sugar and the creamer, and then I wind it down to just the creamer and not as much.
When it's convenient for whoever's serving me coffee, well, okay, if somebody says, can I get you a cup of coffee? I always just say just black coffee. I don't want to be any trouble. I don't want to, try to explain proportions or whatever. But I also then pretend that I'm a cop on a cop show, because then, every cop on every cop show ever takes their coffee black.
Yeah, I can see that. I wonder if it's because cops, I don't know, they like black coffee, or is it because for the cop shows, for whatever reason, it looks better?
Most of the cups that you see people drink out of on TV shows are empty anyway.
Yeah, I got a buddy of mine that's been on the podcast. He's another author, James Pittman. He publishes J.E. Pittman. He was telling me some of the ice cream and the cakes are actually weird things you wouldn't think of, because if it was really what they said, it'd be melting. Yeah. So I was kind of disappointed to hear that the food pictures aren't actually food.
Right. Oh yeah. As far as food commercials,
yeah,
the only thing that has to be real legally is the thing that's specifically being advertised. So the Cheerios are really Cheerios, but that's Elmer's glue that they're in.
Oh, okay. Interesting. But yeah, they do things. If nothing else, just the camera lights would get hot, and I could see where they're talking about why that does it. Although at this point, I would assume with plastic and resins, they could make just about anything for props.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I do enjoy black coffee. The only thing I can't do is instant, and that just too many memories for me. There's
an instant coffee that I discovered about 10 years ago. In fact, I'm jumping around all over the place. I realized looking in the camera here, it looks like I'm wearing an undershirt. I'm actually wearing a Dying Light shirt.
Okay.
Because I went to Poland for 3 months, lived over there while I was working on Dying Light. I wrote the main story for the game, most of it, and a bunch of other stuff for it. And
cool.
At Techland there, they had an espresso or cappuccino maker, and it broke one day. And so I was looking around the break room, and I found this instant coffee out of Germany called Jakobs. It looks like Jacobs. And I thought, all right, well, I'll try some instant coffee. And it was by far the best instant coffee I'd ever had, and better than most drip coffees that I've had. So that's what I drink now. I order it from Amazon, It's relatively inexpensive, and I'm not affiliated with Jacob's Coffee in any way, but I will gladly endorse their product.
So for me, it's not even so much the flavor. If you served it to me and I didn't know, I wouldn't care. But when we were in the Army, you get the Folgers instant coffee little packs in your MREs. And because they worked us so hard and we were just so sleep deprived, we'd put it under our gums like dip because it makes the caffeine go straight to your bloodstream. And every time I see the instant Folgers coffee, it's just like, oh, I get that visceral shudder.
Unpleasant associations, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know, like I said, I've got a coffee pot, although given how often I live in hurricane zone, so I really ought to invest in like a percolator and a French press, just because you want to have something when the power goes out, right? Yeah. But that is on my to prep list because that's the important thing. In fact, one of the questions we ask all of our guests, and we're going to air the commercial in a second, and then we'll come back and start talking about your books. But one of the questions we routinely ask them is, would you live in your game or your world that you created if you could? And my answer is always with enough plot armor and can I take coffee? Because those are the two important questions right there. Like I'm not opposed to colonizing Mars, but I mean, if I can't take coffee, I'm done. I got to stay home.
Well, yeah, there's a certain amount of creature comfort that is just.
I mean, I slept in the sand, in the dirt, through a sandstorm. It's not the building, it's the coffee. It's my Zen spaces when I just drink that coffee.
Gotcha.
So the other thing that's weird though is I've started learning to like iced coffee in the summer. Once I got a friend of mine showed me how to make it right, because it would always taste too weak for me. But like when I served in Iraq, we were with the Brits at noon-ish. They would literally stop. It's 140 degrees and they're stopping to make hot tea. I'm like, you dudes are freaking nuts. It's too hot for that. They swear it cools you off. I'm not convinced. I know people have told me the science for that checks out, but I'm still not convinced. But yeah, they would stop in the middle of the hottest part of the day to have hot tea. I'm just like, ugh. Someone's got to do it.
No, I want something cold. I mean, even if it's just to pour over the top of my head.
Yeah.
If it's that hot.
But I'm also from the South, so tea should be served iced and sweet. It's basically diabetes in a cup.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, you can probably tell from the way I sound, but I grew up in Georgia.
Yeah.
Northwest Georgia, just south of Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Okay.
So I have a great appreciation for sweet iced tea.
Absolutely. And when I was going to grad school in Philadelphia, we would go to the Hooters, not because their wings are great, because I think wings are overrated. It's a lot of work to get very little meat on wings in general. Give me the breast any day of the chicken. I realize phrasing probably could have been better on that one, but we would go to the Hooters not because their chicken was good, but because it's the only place in the North that sold sweet tea. Because Hooters was incorporated in Georgia, and one of the owners to franchise's requirement is the menu had to be the same everywhere. So all of them had to have sweet tea. They didn't have to make a lot of it if they didn't sell it, but they had to have some available.
That's the experience I had. I lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico for a little while, and I would go to Golden Corral.
Yeah.
That was the only place in Albuquerque that you could get actual proper sweet iced tea. Everywhere else, and oh God, especially in California, if you ask for iced tea, they're like, well, we have peach and we have raspberry and we have blackberry. No, I want, like, they don't know what I'm talking about.
I feel your pain. And then if they're like, well, you can add it to the unsweet tea, and I'm like, no, because the chemicals don't bond. It's science, people, chemistry. You got to add the sugar while it's hot. Although I've recently learned to indulge in sun tea. You can throw the sugar in that and it'll bond over the heat. I didn't used to like it because it always came too weak, but then I realized that was more a function of how much actual leaves and how long they steeped it, not the way they steeped it. And so when I realized you could adjust for that, I'm like, okay, I can dig this. Yeah,
tea should be strong. You ought to be able to stand a spoon up in it.
Absolutely. When I was in college in Charleston, we called it table wine.
Right.
Because it's just one of those things.
Carve me off a slice of that tea.
Exactly. See, you get it. Now, do you say pecan or pecan?
I say pecan. In Northwest Georgia, everyone says pecan.
Okay. I learned, I went through Georgia for some training, and then going back there to visit a friend, the concept of goober peas. I'd never heard that expression before, but I heard it in Georgia. It's the boiled peanuts.
Yeah. Yeah.
We just called them boiled nuts or boiled peanuts. I'd never heard them called goober peas before. I knew what it was because it was back to the Civil War era. I was just surprised people still use the term.
That's from farther south. That's southern Georgia.
Okay, well, I was in northern Georgia when I met up with my buddy, but it's good to know the origin. But yeah, I mean, I love boiled nuts. The boiled peanuts are delicious. So we get those in Virginia too, because one of the large peanut companies, and it's the one with the little peanut with the top hat guy. I'm drawing a blank on what company that is. Planter, yeah, they grow some of it in Virginia. So. All right, well, we're going to pause for a moment while we shamelessly show for the man, and then we're going to start talking about his Demon-Sleuth Scrolls series. But with that, we're going to pause while we shamelessly shill. Well, excuse me, for the woman today.
In a world where magic is controlled by law and government, mages are both coddled and persecuted. Corey Monroe knows she isn't a mage, and her best friend is. Reality isn't always what you know. If you are looking for an urban fantasy with found family, an education-based magic system, and evolving storylines, try My Luck by Mel Todd, book 1 in the Twisted Luck series, available exclusively on Amazon.
All right, thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. And if nothing else, buy the book to support Mel because she's an awesome lady. And if you like Robert Ross's stuff, her narrator for the Twisted Luck, who you just heard, is his daughter. So you can get all nepotistic, I guess. Hey, you got to help your friends out, right?
Yep.
All right. So first, before we get started, we do have, let me throw this cover up of the first book and we'll go through those in a minute. But one of the things, because we do have families that listen to our podcast, that they ask is, use the movie scale rating because everyone knows it, but what would you rate this on a scale of, for suitability for audiences?
It's rated R.
Okay.
It's absolutely not meant for kids.
Is it the violence? Because, you got some mature readers that, maybe at 14 might be capable of it. I know you were probably a precocious reader yourself. So, with that in mind.
I mean, I think anybody in high school, probably like 16 and up would be fine.
Okay.
I don't want to get any parents mad at me. That's why I say, this was not intended for young audiences.
Yeah, that's one thing I learned working with James Ward is he called it the angry mom rule because he didn't want to do anything to make the moms mad. Because when your product, which for him was Dungeons and Dragons, is selling to kids, the kids don't have credit cards, the moms do. So you got to keep them happy. So I try to apply that now where possible. It's just good business.
Yeah. I have another trilogy that's a science fiction thing, and one of the all three of the covers actually are the main character. It's a depiction of the main character on the cover in a suit of very high tech armor, and I get little kids coming up and they're like, "Oh, that looks like Ant-Man," or "That looks like Iron Man," and the parents are like, "So can we get that?" And I'm like,
"Maybe for you." Maybe for you, but not the kid.
Yeah. Yeah. For the kid, I have this graphic novel right over here.
So before we get started, obviously adult content, well, mature, because that all has connotations. Yeah, it's for adults, people. So where did the basic premise or the idea that became the Demon-Sleuth Scrolls series come from?
Well, okay, and again, I'm going to try to tell this story concisely. Several times I've done what's known as the Couch and Water Tour in Hollywood, and that's when you go out and talk to movie studio executives and producers and whatnot, and you go to their office, and they tell you to wait on the couch, and their assistant brings you a bottle of water, and 15 or 20 minutes after the meeting is supposed to start, then you're called into the office, and then you pitch your project. So in 2011, a tornado hit my hometown here in Georgia, which is where I live now. Actually, I grew up, I moved away. I was gone for like 20 years, but then I came back. It's a whole story. So in 2011, a tornado came through and hit the town pretty hard. It killed 6 people and it did a boatload of damage, and it just really changed the character of the town. It made it look like a different place. So in the aftermath of that, I was thinking, what kinds of things got pulled out of people's houses and scattered all across the county. You know, what would that look like? Did somebody's diary wind up in somebody else's front yard? That started thinking about the secrets that would be uncovered. That led to a concept where the tornado knocks a house off its foundations that everyone thought was abandoned and reveals a recently used torture dungeon. So that the town's new sheriff has to go and try to figure out who this predator is that's been dwelling there undetected for who knows how long. So that was just a concept. And I went out to Hollywood. I pitched that. Uniformly, what I got was, oh, that's fantastic. We love that. It's too bad it's not based on a book. And I was like, wait here. And I went off to the small press that I was working with at the time, and pitched the concept, and they were like, absolutely, let's do it. So the pitch meeting was in April, and the book itself came out in November, and that is called The Storm. It's out there now. You can buy it. And that came out in 2018, and I was working on the second book for that, and then there was like this pandemic that happened or something. And over the course of the outbreak and the things that it did to society and people and whatnot, I basically just lost my taste for the real world completely. I'm like, it was great, realistically depicting a small southern town and a murder mystery. I still like the murder mystery part, but I wasn't really interested in getting into the horrendous things that regular humans can do, because I was seeing it all over the place. So I created a new world, an original fantasy setting, in part, honestly, and this is back to the professional nerd thing, in part inspired by one of my favorite all-time video games, Skyrim.
Excellent choice. I love it.
Some of the design sensibilities came from Skyrim, that were inspired by. And I created a situation where an outsider, in this case a non-human, got forcibly inducted into the crime fighting, the crime investigation segment of an all-human empire in a fantasy setting. And the thing that sort of drives, especially the first book, is that the magic system in this world is all based on runes forged out of this one particular metal called argonium. And if you're selected to be a rune bearer, they get implanted under your skin in specific ways. It's basically hooked into the five senses.
Okay.
So one of the main characters is a sight sensor, and she has runes actually in her corneas. And before that, she was blind. So the runes allow her to see, but it also allows her to have a kind of extrasensory perception that makes it really easy to know who committed a crime. She gets to the crime scene and analyzes the scene, and basically she knows who did it. So our main character is on the squad that the sight sensor is on. The individual squads are called crucibles. And I've got my pitch out of order. Like, forgive me for stumbling here. I didn't start the pitch in the rehearsed place that I talked to executives about it with. So no one has been able to get away with any crimes essentially for like 300 years. The censors of the empire know who did it. They find the perpetrator. Justice is swift and harsh. I was inspired sort of by Vlad Tepes. He was supposed to be like a real law and order kind of ruler. Like I've heard it said that in Transylvania under Vlad Tepes's rule, Vlad Dracula, that you could leave a bag of gold on your front steps and it would be there the next morning because no one dared touch it. So the runes, the rune-based magic begins to degrade. Something begins to go wrong with it. No one knows what it is, what's going wrong. Our main character is a non-human a natural disaster drove all of her people out of their homeland. It killed about 90% of them. The rest of them have been forced to be refugees. And so our main character has no choice but to become an unwilling ambassador for her people and an even more unwilling investigator. But she and her people are all tall and gorgeous, and they have violet skin and yellow eyes and horns.
Cool.
And so the humans have been calling them demons. That's kind of like the slur that gets attached to them. They're not demons. That's not a spoiler. They're flesh and blood people. They just look really different. So it's up to the main character, Niska, whose people don't have magic of any kind, to begin introducing actual detective procedures for the first time in like 12 generations. None of the humans know how to solve crimes without using magic. So what the series, part of what drives it, is essentially the creation, the necessary creation of forensic science in a fantasy setting.
So the magic before it degraded was kind of almost like the pre-crime unit in Minority Report kind of vibe?
Little bit, yeah. It's not that you could tell who was going to do what before they did it, but it was like the magic makes it so that basically whoever commits the crime leaves their signature, like leaves an imprint that can be easily identified.
Okay. So it doesn't prevent it, but it definitely makes it impossible to hide it.
Pretty much, yeah.
Did that in this fantasy world end up leading to less crime for a while?
Oh yeah. Oh, before the magic starts to degrade, crimes, especially capital crimes, are pretty rare. Now, humans being humans, humans are kind of an inherently violent species, and you've still got lovers' quarrels that go bad. Somebody commits an offense against someone that is so unforgivable that it drives the other person to commit murder. Occasionally someone tries to commit a crime and then escape the empire, but it never worked. Never worked until now. So figuring out what's causing the magic to begin to break down is also a big part that's continued through the first 3 books. I have plans. In fact, my plan is to do a series of trilogies. Like the first 3 books work as a self-contained trilogy, but there's going to be further trilogies with the same characters.
Okay.
I hope any of that made sense.
It did. So what can you tell us about the main character?
Her name is Niska Stonegate, and she was originally the closest that you could get to translate from her language is priest singer. Her people are called the Sethids. That's Sethyd, Sethid. And the Sethids don't have religion the way humans understand religion. They have a very carefully cultivated code of conduct. And they have role models that they call exemplars. Like there's the exemplar of wisdom, the exemplar of truth. And Niska grew up as someone who sings what humans would call hymns, encouraging people to follow the exemplar's example. So she's not any kind of trained investigator. She's not she's like not part of the special forces or anything like that. The Sethids do have special forces, but she's not part of them. But her mother is a really outspoken political activist, and the side that her mother comes down on turns out not to be the side that comes into power. And so she gets exiled, and Niska has no choice but to go off to help her mother because she's not well. She got hurt in the crisis that drove all of the Sethids out of their homeland. So when the story begins, Niska and her mom are living in the wilderness like literally in the middle of nowhere, in a shack built onto the front of a cave, and Niska trades with the occasional human caravan going by on the highway miles away, because she traps animals and cures their hides and sells those. But the inciting incident is when one of those caravans is carrying the new governor of one of the human territories and gets attacked by brigands, and she comes in, kills the brigands, saves the soon-to-be governor's life, and he's like, I would like to offer you a job if you're amenable. You've saved my life here. I've never seen anybody do to bad guys what you did to that crew over there. Would you be willing to come and be an ambassador for your people with the rest of the empire? And she turns him down flat to begin with, but her mother then convinces her to join, to try to improve human-Sethid relations.
Okay. There's almost room to tell the story of whatever drove. Well, do you address what drove them out in this story, or would that almost be like a prequel trilogy of different characters in the world?
They are going to find out, and in the process of finding out, the truth of the world itself is going to be brought to light, but that's not going to be until the second trilogy.
Okay.
What we know about it is that there was an enormous eruption of some kind, and clouds of toxic gas covered the island nation that they were living on. And those who survived, a lot of them took great damage from exposure to that, and it rendered their homeland completely uninhabitable. So they really had no choice but to go and throw themselves on the mercy of the human emperor.
So that is the main character. Were there any secondary characters that were pretty memorable for you?
Well, yeah, there's the rest of her crucible is the rest of her team. They're the primary supporting characters. There's the site censor, a woman named Campbell Delacroix, and the squad commander is a guy named Raoul Cullen, who's extremely by the book and extremely uncomfortable with trying to implement the techniques that Niska is suggesting. And it's not like Niska's an expert in any of this, but she is very smart. And since she grew up in a people that didn't have any magic, and she at least had some ideas of how crimes were investigated. So she and Raoul butt heads a lot. And sort of a fan favorite character is part of the Crucible is they have these two tracking animals. They're called blood lynxes, which is a species native to this world. And the way it works is that the site censor, well, I don't want to give too much away. I don't want to get into too much granular detail here. Anyway, there are these two tracking animals involved, and their keeper is the fourth member of the Crucible, a guy named Percy Bitters. And Percy has absolutely no filter whatsoever and cusses like a sailor and is just so much fun to write because anything he has to say, he just comes out and says, whether it makes people uncomfortable or not. He's not malicious, but he's just a lot of fun. He's white-haired guy in his late 50s, little impish sort of dude that is in charge of the tracking cats. I try to make it as colorful a crew as I could.
So there are obviously the two races, the Demon-Sleuth, I think you said, and the humans. Are there other fantasy races that live in this world you've created?
There are, and they get discovered over the course of the first three books.
Okay.
But there's also sort of like a subspecies. It's not really a species, but the argonium, the metal that the runes are made out of, that is also found sometimes in the bloodstream of certain animals, and those are called seraphic animals, and they're still animals, but they are as smart as people. And the two tracking animals on the Crucible are both seraphic. Their names are Flax and Jax. And
so similar in vibe to the tree cats from like David Weber's Honorverse kind of vibe, sentient animals?
Yeah.
Okay. What was the inspiration for the Sethid, the blue demon-like people?
A Skyrim character that I came up with, that I created in the game.
Okay.
This is the way my brain works. Sometimes I'll see something that makes me think of something, and what it turns out to be ultimately looks nothing like and is nothing like what the original inspiration was. But what I wanted to do was create a species that is objectively better than humans in almost every way. The Sethids are all tall and fast and strong, faster and stronger than humans. They're all kind of gorgeous. And I wanted the Sethids to basically just make the humans uncomfortable instantly. Like the humans just take an instant dislike to them. So yeah, Niska is 6'3", and just kind of a general badass, but she's the kind of badass that I like, which is one that would rather be at home with a nice cup of tea. You know, she doesn't really want to have to go and deal with all this human nonsense. But if she does, if she has no choice, then she goes and flattens whatever problem there is.
So she's, in addition to being, that she's basically a force of nature in her own right, personality-wise.
Kinda, yeah.
Okay. So when you mentioned the Skyrim as the somewhat of an inspiration, did you pull some of the creatures from Skyrim? So, are we looking at like dragons and giant trolls, that sort of thing?
No. I didn't want there to be any tropey creatures, any tropey races.
Okay. Now, one of the things that Skyrim is known for, and since you said that was the inspiration, is it's the clashing of essentially the Roman Empire at its height versus the Viking at their height, which is an interesting combination. So that's where you get the Imperials versus the Nords. Mm-hmm. Do you see some of those reflected in the cultures of both the Sethid people and the human empire?
Well, a lot of the inspiration for the Sethid culture came from what I have learned about the Finns, the people from Finland.
Okay.
In Finnish, I'm given to understand that there's no term for small talk. The Finns are by nature kind of solitary. They would prefer to keep their own company. If you get 2 or 3 Finns at a bus stop, none of them are going to say anything unless they already know it. Sorry?
I was going to say that kind of culture will make it difficult to reproduce, though.
Well, that actually, that's part of the superiority of the Sethids, is that every time a Sethid woman gets pregnant, she has twins. It's always a boy and a girl.
Helps keep the population strong.
Yeah. Plus, all of the Sethids are essentially the same size. There's no sexual dimorphism there. All the men are the same size as the women. They are all roughly of the same strength level.
Okay. So obviously this is a crime thriller kind of story. Mm-hmm. So is each book in this trilogy going to be almost episodic where they solve one crime, or is it more a series in the truest sense of the word where 1 follows 2 follows 3 and so on?
There is an overarching storyline, but there isn't an individual mystery to solve in each book.
So a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Okay. When you come up with these crimes, are we talking just normal murders, or do you get exotic, like Murder, She Wrote levels of weird?
No, they're the ones in the first 2. The first one is just kind of it's a murder that has taken place that the humans are at a loss of even how to approach. because the runes don't work. The second one is I would say that you could call it a mass murder. And I don't think it's much of a spoiler to say that in book 3, then you encounter a serial killer.
Okay. Given that we talked about this was written for mature audiences and we're talking in the nature of crimes, what would your level of gore for the scenes be when you're talking these crime scenes? Just so that way some people with weaker stomachs know what they're getting into.
Right. Well, there is a lot of action, a lot of close quarters combat with swords and knives. So, blood is spilled. I try not to get gratuitous with it, but I also try to depict what happens if somebody gets cut or stabbed by, a sword fairly realistically. So, it's not like watching Saw, but I don't know. I guess maybe Quentin Tarantino levels of violence.
Okay, very specific. I dig it. All right, so given the kind of horrors you expose the main character to, if you met her in a dark alley and she knew that you were Dan Jolley, the god of her universe, the creator of her torment, how do you see that playing out between the two of you?
Oh, she would have a lot to say. She would demand a lot of answers. And she wouldn't be polite about it. I've never considered that scenario before, but yeah, she would probably have me pinned against the wall by the neck, and maybe with a dagger point right here up my nose, demanding to know what the hell I thought I was doing.
So you did mention twins, and so like twins run in my family. So there's always the trope with twins that they're like almost psychically bonded, and all the closeness that comes with. Now these aren't. Was it fraternal and paternal? I get those two mixed up. They're not identical, obviously, if it's a boy and a girl. Right, but do you play into the twin pairing bond kind of deal?
Yeah. In fact, the Sethid society is not set up in the same way the humans is. For one thing, every single Sethid is pansexual. They don't really take into account specific physical attributes, in part because all the Sethids look so much alike. They're just attracted to the content of the person's personality and whatever else appeals to them. But also, if a Sethid woman decides to get, because that's another part of their anatomy, is they control when they get pregnant. It's actually demonstrated early in the first book. The woman can just keep her womb completely closed. So every Sethid pregnancy is planned, and when the kids are born, it's the mother and her brother who raise them. She and like whoever the father is, if they want to stay together, if the father wants to stick around, then that's great. There are committed Sethid couples, and then there are casual Sethids, and then there are Sethid women who want to have a kid and then forget that the father exists. It's a wide range of that, but it's always basically the mother and the uncle is how they think of it. They're the ones responsible for raising the kid.
Is it almost a matriarchal culture then?
It has to be that's the only way it would work with that physical setup.
Which allows you to have a clash of cultures even more than just the physical look. I see what you did as a creative. That is the one thing is once you start writing, you can never engage with content quite the same because you can sometimes and oftentimes see exactly what and why. But I see what you did there. That's clever. Okay, I get it. And so you created a situation where they don't where they're different enough. That I really like that. That's interesting. Are these out? We ask all the time, but are these out in audiobooks? Because with my head injury, I do all of my listening with my ears, so I always ask.
The first one is being recorded right now. Okay. There have been some delays with it. I'm hoping to have it out by summer.
So I know if you don't know, dear listener, there's still some level of backlogs with audiobooks because for the people that were doing their audio recording, for the voice actors that were working for companies. They couldn't go into the studio because the studio was, at the job site that was closed. So if they didn't have their home recording studio, they weren't doing much during COVID. So there is it's getting better every day, but there is still somewhat of a backlog when it comes to audiobook production.
Well, and a lot of indie authors are embracing the whole text-to-speech AI generated audiobook thing. And I am not going to do that. If that causes a delay in getting my audiobooks out, then so be it. But I'm not ever going to use AI in any creative capacity ever.
I know I'm a mixed mind on that one, only because, I know plenty of people who are either severely dyslexic or vision impaired. My grandfather worked with the visually and auditory, the deaf and the blind. I was trying to remember the proper terms and my mind just went blank. And so if the AI voice is how they can listen to the book, but I think most e-readers do that already. You don't have to do anything special for it.
And that would be fine if somebody wanted to download the book and then just run it through their own text-to-speech thing. It's when you start putting voice actors out of work.
Oh yeah. I know
I object to.
I have had people contact me to buy the book directly as a PDF because the Speechify app will read it to them if you upload it a PDF. And so I get working with people with disabilities, but I also, when you listen to the audio version, because I've listened to some on YouTube just to see what the difference was, to see if I could tell. Oftentimes you can tell because the pronunciation of words that are similar, spelled the same but pronounced different with different meanings by context, and they can't get those right. And it annoys the heck out of me.
Yeah.
So I feel your pain. All right, so audiobooks are coming.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to go through the covers before we wrap this up, because I did promise you we'd keep it as close to an hour as we could. So this is obviously the rune on the eye, and the eye is bleeding. So does the implanting the runes cause dismemberment or not?
Well, no. The magical effect that each rune implantation has is specific to the rune bearer.
Okay.
So the way Campbell Delacroix's runes work is she goes to a crime scene, or as they call it in the book, a crime site, and uses the runes and sees the crime replayed in a very particular way, and it involves blood, and she winds up crying blood after seeing a crime scene. And it's the blood of the perpetrator. The tracking animals then get a good sniff of that, and that's what they use to go track down the perpetrator.
That is both curious and mildly horrific. Okay. Now, I don't know if this is intentional, but this cover image where the close-up on the face is definitely giving me Weeping Angels vibes from the Doctor Who.
Oh, well, I love me some Weeping Angels, but that wasn't the intent.
Okay. This is the second book cover because I figured we'd go over it. I'm not quite sure what we're looking, because this looks a lot more sci-fi than fantasy on this one.
Well, it's not exactly what Niska looks like. It's representative of her, but she does have violet skin and yellow eyes, and if you look close, there are horns coming out there. Her horns don't look exactly like that, but that is supposed to be Niska there. Okay.
Obviously, that's one of the things you learned that I didn't realize as a reader until I became a writer myself, is that the cover art is never an exact representation, but when you do have the cover art, the readers are going to visualize it that way.
Yeah. Well, if you go on my website, you can see I had a painting of Niska commissioned.
Okay.
And so you can see exactly what she does look like.
And of course, this is her, I'm guessing, again.
Another representation of her, yes.
I like this one better. And this looks like someone I should be sending a paladin to cleanse from a region, but it's cool that you picked that as the good guy.
Yeah, well, yeah, some things happen in book 3 that they affect the nature of her. Okay.
No spoilers, so we'll leave it at that. All right, so we did promise you. Is there anything about this universe? Because I'm intrigued enough that I want to check out the audiobook when it comes out. Is there anything about this universe that we didn't discuss that you think the readers need to know to really hit it home for the series?
Well, really, it's just it's kind of like the human society is like an exaggerated version of modern American society, and the Sethid society it's kind of like one vision of one way that there could maybe be some improvements. Not necessarily, I'm not saying that they are the perfect species. I'm just saying that that's one approach that you could take, because like I was thinking when I was coming up with the whole world, two of the things that cause problems historically on both major and minor scales are conflicts over religion and conflicts over sex. And so I thought, okay, we're just going to do away with the formalized religion for the Sethids. And I was thinking about an anthropology class I took one time where I was reading about Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, who I think she was in Papua New Guinea, I want to say, living among this tribe that would be, they were undeveloped by modern technological standards. But she was saying that basically anyone there who wanted to have sex with anybody else, if the other person was willing, they would just go ahead and do it. There were no hangups. There were no societal, not taboos, but stigmas. And she said that they were the happiest people that she'd ever encountered in her life.
Okay.
So I thought, okay, how would you remove almost all of the conflict and stigmas and puritanisms or whatever? Well, you make the entire species pansexual. And so kind of like in the course of the books and in the course of the second trilogy, which I'm working on, it kind of just explores that.
So this was almost, rather than the modern trend of box checking, which I don't like mostly because I feel like it's lazy writing, this was almost purpose built to create a culture vastly different from humans just to have conflict.
Well, yeah.
I like it because it's different. Heinlein did a lot of that in, even in the age where before all of that was a thing, he was doing that too. So there's a long history on the spec fic side of taking things to extremes so you can examine them more closely.
Yeah.
And there's value in entertainment in that. So I'm curious now. So I'm definitely going to check it out. So as we bring this to a close, if you could, would you get the runic implants for any of the magics?
Oh, well, yeah. Well, with the caveat, the thing is that the metal is toxic and there's not a single rune bearer who's lived past 40. That's the trade-off. Like you get a lot of power, you get a lot of prestige in the empire, but you don't get to live very long.
At what age do they do the implantation?
Usually between 20 and 25.
So if they're doing it at 20, it's roughly 15 to 20 year range once you get it.
Mm-hmm.
Yikes. Okay.
Early retirement.
No retirement plan. That's good for the corporations, I guess. So with those runes, is there a limited range of options for the magic as far as runes results?
It's pretty limited, pretty regimented. I wanted it to be a hard magic system as opposed to the soft, mumbo jumbo. So yeah, the list, the number of abilities that it grants you is based on what sense it's enhancing, and
so essentially there's five classes, if you would, of this type of magic, because the five senses.
Yeah, well, and really only 4 because they never could get the taste runes to do anything good.
Okay. I like that little bit of trivia.
Yeah. So there's the sight, the hearing, the scent, and then the touch is a little bit different. That's where the Imperial Special Forces come in. that's where you have the Argonium infantry, because they have touch sensors which vastly increase their strength and speed.
But it also means there's no retirement from the military either at that point.
Well, from the Argonium infantry, there's a pretty extensive army, and the Argonium infantry is just like the elite of the elite of the elite.
Yeah, I'm not signing up for that.
but they're so incredibly powerful that it's like you unleash the Argonium infantry on like a peasant uprising or something, and it's like nuking them. Just like they are an absolute. If they show up, everyone dies.
Okay. Would you live in this second alternate Earth? Well, I'm assuming it's an alternate Earth, right? Like from a geographical standpoint.
It's not Earth. It's a different planet.
No. I know. I'm just saying a lot of fantasy writers just take the globe, take off all the countries and stuff, but leave the terrain because it's easy. I've done it myself. No shade. So is this a remodeled Earth, or is it completely different planet, completely different like terrain features, etc.?
Little column A, little column B, all of which will be explained in a future book.
Okay.
But would I live there if I had a lot of money? Maybe. But for the rank and file, no, it's not a forgiving place.
Fair. All right. And then the last question, you did mention that Skyrim empowered you, and you can learn a lot about a person by which faction in Skyrim they pick. So who do you side with, the Nords or the Imperials?
Oh, I never played either a Nord or an Imperial. That goes back to picking the unconventional.
Okay.
Like when I was a teenager, never once did I play Ken or Ryu on Street Fighter 2. I was always Blanca or Dalsim or E Honda. I'm trying to remember. This is a little shameful of me because I'm blanking. Are there orcs? Are there orcs in Skyrim?
There are orcs. You've got the Bretons, which is essentially Britons. You've got the Khajiit, which was like the cat people.
Yeah.
All the shades of elves.
I think I played an orc mostly.
Argonians are the water lizards. The Red Guards are essentially not quite a copy of African culture, but kind of an amalgamation. And then, of course, you got the Imperials and the Nords.
Yeah, I think I mainly played an orc.
And I'm never quite sure what the Bosomers were, but I never played it either. Oh, it's another shade of elves. Okay, I remember now.
Yeah.
I was always the Nords, mostly because I like the Viking culture. And I served at a time where Viking culture kind of inspired the army culture. That shifts generationally. I remember like in the 80s, well, I wasn't in, but I remember hearing about it. In the 80s, it was all like Native American inspired. It kind of rotates by the zeitgeist. But because of that, I was already post-army when I started playing. I always went with the Nords, and their quest for freedom and independence kind of speaks to me as an American.
Yeah.
But the Imperials had good roads. So okay, that's cool though. All right, so this is the part, dear listener, where I remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right book. So do your part, people. It really does make a difference. Tell a friend, tell another friend, spread the word. That's how you get more books that you like out in the universe. And so with that, how can listeners or viewers that want to check you out at home, how can they find you on the internet?
Easiest place is my website, danjolley.com. You can go there and learn probably more about me than you wanted to. You can sign up for my extremely infrequent newsletter. Order any of my books. They're all listed there. And there's a contact form. You can drop me a line. I am happy to reply to anybody who reaches out. And I could use more followers on Blue Sky. So if you want to find me there, not that I post very much. I'm not good at social media. I never have been. I've been on Facebook since it started in 2007, and I'm not good at it. But I am there. So yeah, if you want to reach out and say hello, I am available.
Okay. I mean, I remember MySpace, and Tom was my first friend on the internet. So that's how old I am. I wonder what's happened to Tom. Nobody ever talks about him anymore.
He's probably retired on his own private island now.
Oh man, we messed up. We should have invented MySpace and then sold it for like $1 billion. All right.
I should have done a lot of things.
Right? Mined Bitcoin from the beginning and just sat on it.
Yeah.
Trillionaire. And that's always funny. You always can tell the tech nerds because they're like, oh, I used to have X number of Bitcoins. And what happened? I lost them because I didn't think they were important. And then they'll do the math and cry when they realize how much value that would have been if they'd kept it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Before we get all maudlin and sad about what could have, should have been, I will tell you can find us on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree / Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, Linktree / Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, the TikToks, maybe the Twitters, the Spotify, the Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. We have our email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. For professional purposes only, people save the shenanigans from Adam Stabby Stab on the Instagram, Twitter, and the email. You can support the show by going to buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee till it pours out of their eyeballs, people, and then I'll make them drink it again because I'm just that kind of guy. If you use the link in the show notes, code podcast grunts, you get 10% off. We get a little bit of a kickback. You shop local. It's a win-win, people. Plus, the coffee's really good. It is gourmet. It is not my daily drink, but I definitely have some when I want just premium quality coffee. And even cooler, it is roasted and bagged and manufactured in the United States. It is not a drop shipping operation. So when they say made in America, they meant it. I was shocked as an adult when I realized how you could gimmick that and literally, send it overseas to be, put together, and then somehow it's still made in America. The tricky advertisers, you know what I mean? So, all right. Thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my absentee and insane co-host, I am J.R. Handley. This was the Blasters and Blades Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time. We'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. All right. Thanks for coming on, Dan. This was a whole lot of fun.
Thanks for having me.
You'll have to drop me a line when your audiobook goes live, because I'm definitely going to check it out. And we definitely need to interview your publisher too, because we've been meaning to get them on for the Small Press Radio Hour. So now I am popping that up to the top of the list. Hartness is a good people.
He is, and he's a better talker than I am, and he's happy to come on and sing the praises of Falstaff books.
Well, if he couldn't do that or wouldn't do that, we might have a problem with him as a business owner, but take the wins where we can get them. And with that, I will say thank you, dear listener, and until next time.